So all things are composed of matter. You, me, everything around us is made up of matter. And chemistry is the study of the properties of matter. So matter is composed of atoms. An atom is the basic unit of matter. So atoms can be divided into three subunits. They are composed of protons, neutrons, and electrons. So all of these subatomic particles then, we characterize them by two basic traits. We characterize them by charge, and we characterize them by mass. So charge is pretty basic. That's just whether or not something is positive, negative, or has no charge, right? Mass is also pretty basic. It's just a measure of the quantity of matter. All right. So let's talk about the protons and neutrons and electrons in terms of these two characteristics. So in terms of charge, a proton is positive, and in terms of mass, proton has a mass of 1. All right. Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the electron with a negative charge, and it actually has a mass of not 0, but it's close enough to 0 for our purposes that we'll consider it to have essentially negligible mass, right? And then we have the neutron, which has no charge, but it has a mass of 1. Now that we know that atoms are what makes up all of matter, we can talk about how atoms are organized a little bit more into more complicated structures. A substance that's composed of a single type of atom is called an element, right? So we talk about the different elements that occur in nature as having different characteristics. And we can talk also about like what makes an element, right? And what makes an element, what gives an element its characteristic traits are the number of protons. So the number of protons that an atom possesses is referred to as the atomic number. Let's talk about how these subatomic particles are actually organized within the atom. In this case, let's talk about it as the atomic nucleus. All right? What we find inside of the nucleus are protons and neutrons. Okay? And the electrons are out here orbiting around our nucleus. So a simplistic way of thinking about this is kind of like a planet orbiting around the sun. And we call this space that the electrons occupy around the nucleus the electron cloud. And we'll talk more about this electron cloud later, and we'll find out that while this is a nice way to conceptualize how the relationship between the electrons and the nucleus, atomic nucleus, this is a little bit of an oversimplification. Something that chemists use quite a bit, and to be able to summarize all of the atomic elements and their properties is something called the periodic table. So you can see here in the periodic table that the elements are listed, the full name, the abbreviation, as well as the atomic number. It also has a listing for the atomic mass. So this is a very convenient, organized way for chemists and biologists to be able to reference the elements so that you don't have to actually memorize everything about every element. And as we'll find out, the way that these elements are organized into columns and rows is going to actually tell us a lot about individual characteristics of the elements just based on their location in the table. All right, so in this lesson, we've learned a lot about atoms and how they make up the basic building blocks, basically, of chemistry and then also of life. So an atom is the basic unit of matter. Mass is a measurement of the quantity of matter. And it's a characteristic along with charge, which is used to define the subatomic particles that make up an atom. So one subatomic particle is a proton, which has a mass of 1 and a positive charge. A neutron is a subatomic particle with a mass of 1 and no charge. And finally, an electron is a subatomic particle with negligible mass, which for our purposes of biology will count as being 0, and a negative charge. An element is a pure substance that consists of only one type of atom, and elements are organized into something called a periodic table based on their atomic number. And atomic numbers is defined by the number of protons in an atom. And finally, as far as the organization of an atom is concerned, the protons and the neutrons make up a dense structure in the middle of the atom known as a nucleus, with the electrons circling around that nucleus in something called a electron cloud.